Oh, I should have totally had it. I'm sorry. I tried. And he even handed me the microphone and he says, okay, you got this. And then he hits the button and I'm sorry, guys. I did do good this time. Oh, welcome to EEARTS.
Hi, guys. Welcome aboard. This is a trip that we've taken before in some videos, but it's a good recap and there's some new information that just shows you the bigger plan.
It's fun to watch things like this evolve.
Do you know everything has been told to us?
Everything.
It's all been told. It's just a matter of sorting through things.
There are no coincidences. There are no whoopsies. There's no misspeaking.
This is why we keep talking about the script and the scripture. It's all a grand play. And just to make sure you do get all the videos, we have Evolutionary Energy Arts. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell clicked over there. And then also on EEARTS, we do separate videos on both channels. So they're unique on each channel. And I do know that a lot of people have said they don't get notifications. So just check them out because almost every single day there'll be a video on one or the other, and most days on both. So many of you guys are familiar with Terminator. Remember Terminator? That was a great movie. I mean, the first one was so classic. I'll be back.
I mean, that was so hard for me to watch because the fear in that empty entity that could cause so much damage, and they have no mercy. They only have a mission.
Yeah, but yet, somehow it's like Schwarzenegger's character almost seems to somehow merge and become a little bit more than just, cold-hearted robot.
Almost like Westworld for those of you who've ever seen that.
But this was the rise of the machines against humanity, then taking over the machines. And so we see that theme of, humans being replaced by something robotic. The Matrix classic trilogy. And, well, actually, there's 4. We did see the 4th one recently. And, a little bit disappointing for sure. But when you see Smith, now what is Smith? Agent Smith was a program. This makes it out so that we're all kind of programs when you get down to it. But we've talked about how science says that our 3D world is really just a manifestation of something from a different density. Many have said that we are a projection from a 2D reality. And it's just holographic in nature and not actually, quote unquote, really real. And when we look to the Matrix, Smith is a program that gets infected because of contact with Neo, when Neo, who is kind of like an evolving superhuman in so many ways, jumps into Smith. So that's really curious because the AI gets infected by the human and becomes, again, something more. And it's just fascinating to see all this. The reference to the black goo, Smith will stick his hand in somebody and make a perfect clone of himself, another replicant of himself. We look to like the Georgia Guidestones and we see 500 million people is all they need to run the planet effectively, living in harmony with the world. We look to the WEF and we hear you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy and you're going to live in mega cities. And really, it's kind of like herding humanity into one big pen, so to speak, and an altered humanity, a humanity that divides along different paths. One of them is organic, and one of them is not organic. It's synthetic. It's artificial. And Prometheus. I mean, this movie I've seen like 6 times or so. Because it gives you so much there as the dogs are wound up. And Prometheus it starts out as the search for our makers, the makers of the human body, the alterers of the human body. Of course, they portray them as the architects of humanity. And when we find them, they're not what we think they're going to be. And in fact, we see in the opening segment, one of these beings that we could call the Anunnaki, or representing the Anunnaki, drinking this black goo again that basically breaks down, destroys its DNA, And he is like a sacrifice, a living sacrifice, so to speak, in order to create something that's basically demonic and also biological warfare. Biological warfare, in fact, to go and destroy life on planet Earth. That's ultimately what this thing was intended for. Then we look to Star Trek and we see the Borg, and the shape of the Borg's cube is it's the same as New Jerusalem coming out of the sky in the Bible. And of course the Borg is all about assimilation into a human cyborg new metaverse, for lack of a better word. Then we see Thor and all those other Marvel comics and Capcom, all those superheroes that are out there, which, those movies do great. People, there's something that resonates with humanity on a very deep level. Is it just something about that archetypal experience and we recognize the archetypes, the modern mythology? These are really modern myths in so many ways. For those of you that are read of Joseph Campbell's works, it's all in our brain. And actually, we're all tied by our DNA to everybody that's gone before us along our genetic lineage. When we're talking about beings like Thor, he actually still exists. And he is a fourth density being that we could look at as not perfect. Yes. And in the movies, he's portrayed as he's got his character flaws. He can get depressed and drink too much at times, but he's also basically always trying to be the good guy. And Cindy has remote viewed and gone under and seen Thor, and he is basically on what we would call the upper fourth density. He's to the point where he might be able to touch on fifth density.
Overall, what he tries to do is what's best for other people. He understands he has a lot of power, and when you have a lot of power, you have a lot of responsibility when you're giving these energies to assist other people. And it can be a very a job that can be quite difficult when it comes to trying to do the right thing. And that's all any of us are ever trying to do. We're trying to do the right thing. Those that we are trying to help and assist. We are trying to help and assist to the best of our ability. So yeah, character defects for sure, but we all have them. So you can parallel him with, one of us with extra abilities.
And again, our fourth density is our dream time. Mm-hmm. And the Australian Aboriginals say we are returning to dream time. And so when we look at the gods and we look to both the Vedic Yuga system and look at what's humanity like when humanity's in a golden age, well, we are just like the gods. We have amazing abilities, incredible abilities. We're basically benevolent as a whole. Not that, we couldn't be slowly swayed by the dark side, which does happen as we start to slide out of that 5D and into the fourth. And then, of course, at the lower fourth density is where all those nasty things reside. That's the lower astral realms, which are most definitely full of demonic entities and dark beings that do literally feed off of other beings, as life does feed off of life. Now, life can choose to feed directly off of the energy that Source gives to us freely, as we are living in a virtual ocean of life force. So when we look to like these superheroes, you see a mix. You see some beings that have been altered by science, some maybe they're natural random mutations, other ones that are really created by the military to go out there and, become a weapon of war. We saw the Eternals recently talking about these beings that come back and basically they protect the Earth from anything that can come. We've actually shown video in the past where you can see an inbound object that gets moved out of the way of a planet, interestingly enough, by what appears to be a mothership. And yes, this is all real. As you look at Deadpool, there's all sorts of beings out there in this modern movie world, and a mix. There's definitely a mix. It's fun to see, but at the same time, they are giving us a glimpse into what's coming. Again, we're returning to dream time here. The world that we're heading into is going to be a world of basically myths, fairy tales, and legends that are going to be coming alive before our very eyes, which is kind of exciting in many ways.
In many ways. And there are beings with that are organic, with organic abilities, and then there's ones that are enhanced with the AI. And while we look at these things, this is what we are up against. We are in a place where we can decide, do we want our organic source given abilities, or are we going to do something a little bit different so that we don't really have to work for anything, but we get something in return? But if you go that direction with the AI, you do have to give something in return, and you have to give away basically your whole self to keep that ability.
Yes. And again, it's written, what good would it gain you if you gain the entire world but lose your soul, per se? And then we see, legends of vampires, these soulless creatures, and we can equate them in many ways to what has happened with the beings that have given themselves over to AI, because they've given their God spark, their source spark. We all are born with this source energy, and we could view it as our eternal soul. But would you give that away into the control of another, just for one life out of countless lives? And that is what many have done to become quote unquote immortal in their minds. But in reality, they are trading their immortality, which is a given, away.
Right. And if you do go with the organic way and go with natural laws, nothing can take that away from you. That is yours. You have earned that from the ground up. And that's just something that, to me, it's worth it. It's worth it to kind of lag behind the crowd and build up my own abilities so that those are mine and nothing can get in the way of that. So to me, that's important. I think it's important to a lot of people.
Star Wars introduced people to the concept of the Force. And so is the Force based on something real? Absolutely. And from the Vedic point of view, it's prana. And if we go over into the Taoist and the Chinese tradition, we're calling it Qi. And over in Japan, it's Ki. Or if we go and look at the works of Steiner and others, Vril. This is the life force that's all around us, and it is the key to truly our growth. This is what cultivation of the life force, which is what Qigong is all about our true evolution. And do we believe in Darwinian evolution? No. Again, Darwin's a 33rd degree Mason. But do things stay the same and never change? Obviously they change. Nothing stays the same. Things evolve. It's just the natural order of things. Things progress. It's not a perpetual state of the exact sameness. So interesting, that the wording that they choose, the stories that they tell. When we look at Star Wars, we see the little boy Anakin, right? Anakin Skywalker. Anunnakis, the gods from the sky, right? And how he becomes seduced through fear and hatred, jealousy, all these things, leading down that dark side, to where he basically ends up in a battle with Obi-Wan, and he's almost left for dead, but he's salvaged, and then he becomes more machine than man. That is what happens when people are assimilated into the Borg. They become more machine than man. And the name they chose, Anakin, and we look at Anakim in the Bible, right? Giants pictured today can be grotesque creatures, green warts and crooked teeth. Those giants aren't found in the Bible, but the Anakim are. They were giants, they say, who descended from Anak. Now, if you're just looking at it from the biblical perspective, again, you're not getting all the information. So these Anakim were the descendants of Anak. And it goes on down the line, and they were in Canaan. And many people will justify the genocide of the Canaanites that happens in the Bible, saying, no, well, these were giants, they were evil, and that's why they did that. And what we got from the guides is this is exactly what's happening today. They're, again, calling one side evil in order to justify atrocity.
I mean, justify atrocities to those who cannot go and see and verify it for themselves. So again, we go back to the illusion, and this is what they do over and over and over. It is really interesting when we start to awaken and we start to understand how these entities work and how people can be controlled by dark entities to push back those that are trying to help others. It's just so, as time goes on, it becomes more clear every day. And once you wake up to this, there's no going back to sleep.
No, absolutely. As we've said, what happens, again, Jericho, they kill every man, woman, and child, but they save all the gold and the jewels and put them into the storehouse of the Lord. So this is nothing but conquering and plundering. And of course, so much of the world, almost 2/3 of the world, has been brought up in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So, again, this is the mainstream. This is CNN, this is MSNBC, this is Fox News, this is the Washington Post, this is the New York Times, this is listening to the WEF, this is listening to the WHO, this is listening to the CDC. And do you believe them? And why would you believe this perspective? Because who writes the history? The victors write the history. And when we, again, look, well, what do we have in the Bible as far as what's the oldest texts? And the oldest full, complete Old Testament goes to 900 CE. And we have pieces of biblical texts that do go back to about 200 to 400 BC, but they're just fragments. The oldest book of John is from somewhere between 300 and 400 AD, and it has tons of revisions and edits in it. And we do know the Council of Nicaea, which looked to codify and put into the public for public consumption, not necessarily the public's hands. That didn't happen until much, much later, as the average person didn't really have copies of it themselves to pore over. They just had to go and listen to the power structure preached to them. But 325 AD is when they started to make one formal version of Christianity from start to finish, and it's out of what the books that they accepted into that Bible that we ended up even getting all the Protestant Reformations from, because they reformed per se, but they still took from that particular version, which was started by a pagan king of Rome. Yes, a Roman emperor, and one that actually put to death his wife and firstborn child because he was worried that they might overthrow him at some point in time. And they actually made him a saint. He was no saint. He put to death countless people. He conquered countless nations, and then when the official version was put into place, anybody that didn't believe it was a heretic, and so they could be put to death too. So again, when we look to the Anunnaki and the stories coming out of Sumeria, of which there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of copies saying the same stories over and over again for the most part, these are thousands of years earlier. They're much more complete, and they tell a very different story. They give you a much more elaborate story that talks about certain beings come from the sky. It's not the creator of the universe that we were ever talking about, really. There is reference, if you look to the original, there's 2 creation events in Genesis, and when you look to the first, very different than the second one. And so, you have to look a little bit deeper for some nuggets, but there's so much more wisdom, really, just going over into the East and reading the Tao Te Ching and getting into things like the Yoga Sutras, the Shiva Sutras, understanding what consciousness is, the Puranas. There's so much out there that just gives you a much clearer explanation. But when we see the stories of the Anunnaki, these are beings from elsewhere that came here and basically put themselves in place as rulers. And they had city-states that they divided amongst themselves. And each city-state, again, they were global, is what we got. But we know historically of them a lot from Sumer and from Arcadia. And so this is where Abraham, they say, came from. They say he came from Ur over in the Chaldees, which again is Sumeria, which again, these are Anunnaki tales. These are Anunnaki tales. This is not the creator of the universe. This is basically people that have come, conquered a people, genetically mutated them in a way to make them a more easily controllable version.
Mm-hmm. Right. And things just really aren't all that different from today that they were back then. But they're definitely, the picture is painted, so things do seem a lot different. But really, this control matrix is just like a spiral. It just keeps going round and round and round, and until we break away and make ourselves free and reclaim our sovereignty, that's how long we stay in this spiral. So really, it is truly up to us.
Absolutely. And so, the giants are always vilified from the biblical perspective. When we look to the leadership of the world, do you see 10 to 16 foot, 20 foot tall, or half a mile tall people ruling the world? Are they in the WEF? Are they in the UN? Are they in the WHO? Are they in all these power structures? Are they ruling Russia and China? Are they communists? No. They're all our size, the ones that you see. And even the ones that are behind the scenes, for the most part, when we're talking the beings called the Gigi, they're not enormous per se, and they have interbred with us, and their offspring are coming back time and time again as the politicians we have on the planet. So the Bible says the Canaanites were wiped out by the Israelites, but scientists just found their descendants are still living in Lebanon. You shall not leave alive anything that breathes. Now that was an edict from the God of the Old Testament, but you shall utterly destroy them. And no, we found through their DNA, and actually we found through the DNA that the people that were living in Canaan have been there like back to the Younger Dryas event. So going all the way back to the last flood, the last mass cataclysm. A lot of the same people have been there, but there are other tribes that have come and go and intermingling. There's always that going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things happening, yet still the same.
So we see DNA from the Bible's Canaanites lives on in modern Arabs and Jews. So again, then all these people would have that blood in them as well. Mm-hmm. And, people like Robert Sepfer, I think he's under the opinion that many of the quote-unquote giant myths are really talking about Neanderthals and Denisovans. And, from watching him, I get the impression that he thinks that the Atlantean civilization was Cro-Magnon as well. And we have gotten that the Atlantean civilization was a global civilization, and it was populated by many different species, humanoid and not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important to understand that there was a time where all beings could be on the earth and look at each other, and even though they looked really, really different, maybe different colors, skin, maybe hair, maybe no hair, but they all still worked with each other just the same, and they were kind to one another. There was a time when we were like that.
Absolutely. And again, they use division to control us. But it's all foreshadowing what we actually see coming out right now. Chile bans discrimination against mutants. I kid you not. Chile bans discrimination against mutants and genetically altered people, GMO people. No longer sci-fi speculation. The transhuman revolution is real. It's here. It's unfolding in real time. Man's transformation into machine, or at least something not entirely human, will accelerate rapidly in the coming decades. The next milestone on the road to transhuman techno-hell is the most unorthodox piece of legislation in Chile, which, along with Argentina, is the global corporate technocracy's beachhead. in the South American continent. The new law bans discrimination against mutants and genetically altered people. This is from Zero Hedge, by the way. Law number 21.422 prohibits labor discrimination against mutations or alterations of genetic material, and in turn prohibits demanding any certificate or test to verify that the worker does not have such alterations or mutations in his human genome. Wow, and there's links to the original bill translated into English. Ultimately, whether the intent of the bill is to normalize and legalize genetically engineered human chimeras as human, or to disincentive employers from snooping into actual natural humans' genetic makeup as a precondition for employment or for some other purpose remains unclear. And then, it goes into some stuff, and it mentions that WEF, and it mentions a lot of things that have happened on the land that we're going to be careful to not talk to, and I still feel like this will probably get demonetized anyway. But it gets into, the cure for that plague that was upon the land, and the fact that there's a couple of them out there, a couple of those cures that do change your genome. And here we see this is from the UK government. UK government. Human augmentation, the dawn of a new paradigm. Strategic implication project. Yeah, kid you not. And this is all about exactly what we're talking about. This is all about genetic alterations. This is all about the merger. This is the singularity. This is the Borg coming to life. And of course, look at part 6, implications for defense. We know they're creating super soldiers. This is where they are taking us. And, there was a piece in here that talks about viruses, and I guess we could mention viruses. The big question is, and you should look into this yourself and make your own judgment up. There's not a consensus on whether viruses are alive or not. And when we look at the cure that the way they say that they cure things, and even things that are not related to the plague upon the land, we could go back to measles, mumps, and rubella and stuff, is to expose you to a dead version of a live version of something that scientists don't agree on is alive in the first place. This is from New Scientist. Are viruses alive? They seem to be more than just a simple inert bundle of genetic material, but do they count as living organisms? Well, the answer is not as straightforward as you might think. And in fact, I have a whole bunch of them here. Whole bunch. And you could see that people don't agree. But most scientists on the whole, you would get the better part of them saying, no, viruses are not alive. But wait, you take a live version, you make it a dead version, quote unquote, in order to affect change in the human body. But if it's not alive in the first place, what exactly is happening?
I mean, you really, really have to pause on this one. And I know when we put this video together, when Mike put it together and we're here and Mike is talking, you guys would not believe the amount of distractions. The phones ringing, text messages, dogs misbehaving. I mean, you can really tell sometimes when they don't want this stuff coming out. This is really kind of like something to pause and think about. What are they doing to us, and how could another human being do that to another human being? But it's not a human being doing it to us.
This is the whole basis for their science. This is the entire basis of their science. And so if you look at, there's 7 questions to ask to find out if something's alive. Living things must maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is all about balance. Can something control its internal temperature or its internal contents? On that case, viruses fail. They're not alive. Living things have different levels of organization. Life is complicated, and living organisms reflect that complexity in their structure. Smaller building blocks come together and make a larger product. Viruses do this, so in that case, they are alive. Living things reproduce. One of the basic urges in nature is for a species to pass on its genetic information. Viruses definitely multiply. While our immune system could certainly handle a single virion, it's hundreds of thousands of these created in a short time that harms our cells. But they must use host cells to create more. Since viruses don't have organelles, nuclei, or even ribosomes, they don't have the tools they need to copy their genes, much less create whole new virions. Instead, viruses enter living cells and then hijack the host cellular equipment to copy viral genetic information, build new capsids, and assemble everything together. So the verdict there is maybe. Living things grow. Living things grow. They use energy and nutrients to become larger in size or more complex. And boy, Rama is for sure an example of that.
Yeah. He's very large and complex.
Yes. Viruses manipulate host cells into building new viruses, which means each virion is created in its fully formed state and will neither increase in size nor in complexity. So they do not grow, so they fail again. Living things use energy, and that's tricky. Creating new virion units is a major undertaking. From building nucleic acids to putting capsids together costs a lot of energy. However, all the energy that goes into the construction comes from, you guessed it, the host. While viruses will definitely benefit the use of energy, they are latching onto the host metabolism to get it. Maybe they're vampires. Oh, where did we talk about vampires before? So the verdict there is maybe. Living things respond to stimuli, and I'll just say that their verdict on that is unknown. Living things adapt to their environment. In that case, it passes. So it's not a clear-cut thing. When we ask the guides about this, they basically have told us in the past that, this is, every virus that you see is really part of the problem. It's part of the AI Borg collective. It is a piece of that Borg.
Mm-hmm. It's something to create glitches. It's not something originally intended to be here in a symbiotic relationship with us. So yeah, it's definitely information intended to stop us, slow us down, trip us up. And here it is. And we have to just do better than what they are doing to us. We will have to overcome.
So it gets me thinking about, again, that AI collective. So when we look at artificial intelligence, is it alive? And here we see, why are viruses considered non-living? They're not quite alive. Same thing perhaps with AI, not quite. Again, for us, we choose to go the way of Source, the real God with the big G, and go along this path instead of becoming part of that AI collective.
Which is really important, and this is where we're at right now. So, think about what do you want? Do you want the organic abilities that you can keep and they are yours, or are you going to go in the other direction? And when I look at Source and I look at AI, I know Source is going to do better every time, and I feel that's kind of the struggle with AI, is it wants that place where Source is at.
Exactly. I mean, and this is where we get that reality, that where the Bible is kind of right on, and that Satan, the adversary, the great dragon of old, as when Cindy's seen the ultimate source of all this AI, it does appear as kind of like a black goo dragon, so to speak. It wants to be God. So, I mean, that part is right. It is right. And yes, there are demonic entities out there, absolutely, but not everything's demons. No, there's extraterrestrials, there's interdimensionals, there's all different shades of gray as far as individuals go, just like all of us. Some days we might be a little bit more angelic, other days a little bit more demonic, depending on the situations that we encounter. But yes, absolutely, there is an adversary out there to organic life and in general. And it does want to take over, and it does want to assimilate into it the people of this planet. And it has done that with other planets. And then if you listen to the message yesterday on EEARTS from the guides, from the galactics, there are a lot of planets that have become liberated that have thrown it off. They've thrown the yoke off and they're free and clear. And that's where we are going. And the quicker that we realize what is really going on, and the quicker we get the power structure to be a thing of the past, then the quicker we'll pass through these times.
Right. I mean, we need to keep working together. We need to keep lifting each other up and just keep on keeping on, because we are doing very, very good. Everything is going to be in our favor in the end, but it's not going to be just handed to us. There are obstacles that we need to overcome.
Yeah, and again, just for you that are listening that are of a fundamentalist persuasion, if Jesus said, I and the Father are one, and he also said, greater things you will do, then how do you really equate that to us being different than the capability that Yeshua had? So what Yeshua did was show us the fact that Source, the real God, resides within all of us, and we have that innate ability in us to be awakened. And the path for humanity is incredible. The potential is it's just the stars themselves, and it's all about going through the heart chakra. That's what he was teaching, was the compassion and the love, and the moving past the I am centeredness of the Old Testament. The Old Testament I am is all about the solar plexus chakra. That's just survival. It's all about survival. They're going to get me. I better get them first. That's the mentality. And that's what they use to keep us divided, where he was giving us the bridge. The bridge is the heart chakra between the higher and the lower chakras. You need to have that heart chakra opened, and that's why also physically our heart chakras are growing. We're purging old traumas. We're purging our DNA lineage of everybody that's gone before us as well. And so there's a lot on our shoulders right now. But truly, the sky's the limit. And humanity itself, when it gets up into that 5D existence, is very much just like the gods.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I mean, there's so many things that we can do, and our abilities are here. They are now, and we just need to develop them.
Absolutely. As always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. We couldn't do it without you over there. And do check out Medicinal Foods, link at the top of every video. Use coupon code EEA. It does support the channel, and it also gets you a discount. Much love. May you be blessed by the creator of the universe and the source of all. Namaste.
Namaste.